Narayanam namaskritam naram chaiva narottamam devim sarasatim vyasam tado jayo dhiryat nashtaprayasho bhadresu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttamashuki bhaktir bhavati naistiki nigama kapadurugaritam padam shukamakararmita dravisamitam pibata bhagatam rasham aryam mahora horashika bhuvaham Krishna swadam bhagate dhamagiri hishaha karunashta dvishamasha paranako dunoditaham Ramapiya Dabashuta Vishwatam Vibhu Samyapahari Nirambirambiruksaram Prakyayidoho Maharinam Sanklesha Nirvanam Vasanti Nanyatam Anarto Pashabam Shakshad Bhakti Yogamarhok Lokasajiranu Chakra Satpadasamitam Namam Vishnu Panaya Krishna Pasaya Bhutade Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Shami Tinamani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pachani Nirvishesa Sunyavadi Praskita De Sadhani Name Om Agyanati Marandasya Ganangana Sadakya Chaksurun Meditam Yanatashmai Sri Garave Namaham Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yada Bhutade Sayam Rupa Karamayam Tarati Swapanantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Siyata Parakamaram Sri Gurun Vaishnavam Sya Sri Rupam Sagadatam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Stam Sadevam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishikan Vitam Syam Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktavindam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Thank you, Arpit, Sisodia, Ram Kishore, Jean, for joining us on this post-Easter Monday, Motivational Monday. Rob's also going to jump on board here. Saw Rob at the Sunday Feast in Salt Lake City. They have the Sunday Feast on Saturday in Salt Lake City. Saw Rob there. Had a nice talk up there by Ross Vilas also on the other pandemics to which we hardly pay any attention. All the focus is on the COVID pandemic, but we also have ecological pandemic, environmental pandemic, psychological pandemics, pandemics of depression, pandemics of suicide, pandemics of stress, which we tend to overlook. It was a good talk. I'm glad I went up there to associate with the devotees from Salt Lake City Temple. Today is also, in addition to being Easter weekend in Utah, the first weekends of April and October biannually are what they call conference weekend, when the LDS Church has a huge gathering. They build a conference hall in Salt Lake City. I think 30,000 people can be seated there. And then for those who can't personally attend the live, there are satellite feeds to go all over the world. So most LDS people are watching the TV throughout the entirety of the first weekend of April and the first weekend of October. And so our Sunday Feast crowd here in Spanish Fork was a little smaller. Down in Utah Valley, where we're located, is 90% LDS population. Up in Salt Lake City, it's a little more heterogeneous. And so therefore, there was still a decent crowd at the Saturday Feast in Salt Lake City. Good morning, Terry. Terry and Taruni had sent me a note and a very kind donation last week saying that they had a different schedule and might not be able to join me heretofore. But here's Terry coming up, maybe not being able to stay for the whole time, but at least giving us all a hearty Hare Krishna before she goes off to work. And we've also got Gauranga Devi on board, Wayan Aryadi, Arpit Singh, Ram Kishore, Natasha Johnson, Jean Eskelson. Thank you all so much for joining us. We've been doing this since the beginning of COVID, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, 7:30 on Utah time, Motivational Monday, Transcendental Tuesday, Wisdom Wednesday, and we're working our way very slowly through the Bhagavatam. We're not rushing anything. There was one verse on which we spent 3 weeks, 9 sessions, a total of 7 hours. This is our first day on this classic verse from the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, 5th chapter, 10th verse. It's a kind of a pair of verses. This is the first one. There's another verse that goes with it. Here it is. It's what we call the crow verse, or the garbage verse. And the next one is the swan verse, or the scenic pond, lotus flower, waterfall, humming of bees verse. So anyway, first let's get the unpleasant out of the way, and then maybe we can move to the more idyllic, shall we? Good morning, Rupa Manjari. Again, 10th verse, 5th chapter, 1st canto, Srimad Bhagavatam. Nayad bachas chitam parayarsho jagat pavitam pragviniti karichit tadvayasham. Tirtam oshanti nanyata nayatar hamsha naramanti shiksha. Yad bhagvishash. Bachash means words. Those words, chitta padam hare yasho, which do not take into consideration the lotus feet, chitta padam, of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whose fame is spread throughout the material and spiritual worlds. Aishwarya Shamagasha Viryasha Yasha Gyanam Vairagara Sanam Bhagam. God is defined as having 6 opulences in full: wealth, strength, knowledge, beauty, humility, and yasho. Yasho means fame. There's no one more famous than God. Even atheists spread the fame of God, though they do not intend to do so. They say, I don't believe in God. There is no God. All this God talk is poppycock. We don't need to explain the phenomenon of this world in terms of God. Scientists can replace God. So just in the course of reviling God there, they said God 6 or 8 times. So indirectly or directly, everybody is spreading the yasha, the fame of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And the effect of doing that, especially favorably in love and not inimically, the effect is jagat povritam. The entire universe becomes purified. Every sound circles the globe about 24 times. Or every time you say Hare Krishna, or you quote a verse from the Bhagavatam, that goes out from your lips and it circles the globe. They've even found radio programs that aired 60 or 70 years ago. There's still snippets of those sound vibrations circulating around in the atmosphere. So instead of creating nonsense, meaningless sounds, and especially not creating profanity and vulgarity and hate-filled, divisive, demeaning sounds, but if one can dedicate one's life to generating from one's mouth sounds which are concerning the name, fame, form, qualities, and pastimes and paraphernalia of the Lord, then you'll be doing a great service, not only to yourself, but also to the other living beings, to the subhuman beings, to the plants, the animals, the insects, the birds, the fishes, the environment. You'll be purifying the atmosphere on every level. One of Ras Vilas's themes in his talk about the various pandemics last Saturday night was that it all begins in our mind. If your mind is unclear and polluted, confused, foggy, then of course that's going to reflect itself in your external atmosphere, your environment, and your ecology. So their first business is bandharatmat manastasya yenat anatmanatu satpati varjatatma vasatmana. First business is to take care of your mind. It can be your best friend if it's controlled, and if it's not controlled, it can be your worst enemy. So as the mind goes, so does our external environment go, individually and collectively. Chanting Hare Krishna is called a mantra. From the Sanskrit word man, we get the English word mind, and tra means to deliver. A mantra is a scientifically formulated sound vibration consisting of various Sanskrit names of God, which when chanted repetitively cleanses the mirror of the heart, the dust of ignorance, depression. We're in the material world, and everything by default is dark, full of ignorance, confusion. We can't just be passive and expect to have a happy, meaningful life. We can't allow ourselves to be affected, to be the recipients of all the negativity by which we're surrounded, and expect to have a happy, victorious life. The very word culture means that we have to take matters into our own hand, roll back the darkness, present the torchlight of knowledge, in the presence of which darkness cannot stand, and march progressively forward back to home, back to Godhead. those words which have as their focus the all-powerful, all-wealthy, all-beautiful, all-humble, all-famous, and all, whatever I left out, personality of Godhead is the very formula by which the darkness of this world can be dissipated. The entire universe can be purified. Failing which, words which do not describe the Lord are of great value and great use to all living beings, to the planet itself. And those words which do not describe the Lord, yesterday we're reading in our Zoom Sangha about Mahajans. Mahajans are those who blaze the trail, who go ahead, those whom we take for our role models in spiritual life. Yamaraj is a Mahajan. Sukadeva Goswami is a Mahajan. Bali Maharaj is a Mahajan. Lord Brahma is a Mahajan. But Prabhupada says in one purport that everybody has their role models. For instance, those who are atheistic scientists, their Mahajan is Darwin. For those who are sense gratifications, gross sense gratifications, their Mahajans are Ravana, Kamsa, Kumbhakarna, so on and so forth. Trump appears to be a Mahajan for a certain segment of the people. Now, everybody's got those people to whom they look up, and those people who tell them what to do, who set the standard. Okay, so there are Mahajans and there are Mahajans, just like there are birds and there are birds. There are crows and there are swans, and they're both birds. So similarly, those who are sense gratifiers and mental speculators, they have their Mahajans, Hegel, Kant, Nietzsche. And those who are devotees of the Lord, they also have their Mahajans. So swans and crows are both birds, but they are not birds of a feather. Their interests are totally different. And therefore this verse says, those words which do not rise to the imperative, to the prime necessity of the human form of life. Sabai pumsam parodharmo, the highest occupational duty for those who have achieved the human form of life is unmotivated, uninterrupted devotional service to the Lord, Yatma Suprashi, beginning with the tongue, to glorify and honor the name, form, and pastimes of the Krishna. Failing to rise to the mandate, to the highest priority of the human form of life, those words which fall short of centering around the Lord, focusing on the Lord, they are like places of pilgrimage for crows. Tadbayasam tirtam. Tirta normally has positive connotations. Tirtas, places like Vrindavan, Dwarka, Jagannath Puri, Rishikesh, Badrinath. When you say these words, these names of pilgrimages, devotees get a really warm feeling in their hearts. These are places where you go to associate with saintly people, hear the katha, take the prashadam, bhavad bida bhagavatas, tirta bhuta tatart, tirta kurvanti tirtani, shrantashtena gadabhrita. Even a moment's association with a holy Krishna conscious person is the person himself or herself is in fact a walking tirtha, because wherever they go, you hear Krishna katha. You hear those words which purify ourselves, others, and the whole universe. But those words which do not describe the Lord, which glorify a Bollywood star, a sports icon, a political demagogue, those words are rallying points for crow-like men, not at all swan-like men. The swan-like men have no interest in going to places where crow-like men gather to glorify ordinary mundaners. Rather, just in the manner of swans, swans don't go to where there's roadkill. They don't go to where there's garbage pits. They don't go to the same places that the crows like to congregate. Rather, you'll find the swans in a place of scenic beauty with ponds, waters, lotus flowers, waterfalls, humming bees, and beautiful flowers. The crows don't take any pleasure out of such scenes of idyllic beauty. And the swans don't take any pleasure out of ruminating, sorting through garbage and refuse and things which have been discarded and disused. So they're birds, but they're not birds of a feather. Now it's interesting to note that swans take as their food the tender buds of the lotus flower. The lotus flowers produce little tiny buds, which are a delicacy for the swan-like birds. They delve into the lotus flower and they pick these tender, succulent lotus buds, and they relish them. They release flavor in the mouths of the swans. Similarly, analogously, the pastimes of Krishna, we have the Krishna book. Prabhupada wrote a big, fat book detailing the highlights of Krishna's activities and pastimes when he was on the planet 125 years ago. It was financed and underwritten by George Harrison, the Beatles. The idea is that God is not impersonal. He's not a force. He's not an energy. He's a divine person. As a person, he has names. He has Nam Namakari Bahoda Nija Sarvdish. He has many, many names because he's very active. And as there are activities, there are names which accrue to the actor. So the Lord has hundreds of thousands of names which can be chanted and by which one can be purified. And he also, inasmuch as he's a person, he's active, he has a lot of different pastimes, which we call leelas. Just read the Krishna book and you'll see how active the Lord is. Devotees, they take great pleasure in relishing these stories, these leelas of the Lord. Makita madkata pranam bodhyantas sharashanam katayantas chamam nityam tushanti cha ramanti cha. The devotees gather together in groups and they discuss back and forth. They turn the topics and pastimes of the Lord as described by the great souls like Vyasadeva and Narada Muni. And tushanti cha ramanti cha. Tushanti means satisfaction and ramanti means bliss. They derive great satisfaction and they derive great bliss. These topics never get stale. They're always ever fresh. Great souls who have left behind all sense gratification, all mental speculation. They haven't got any interest in Bollywood stories or Hollywood screenplays, popular novels by Nelson DeMille or William Grisham. They have no interest in any of these areas of so-called literary or cinematographic endeavor. Their only focus is gathering together and discussing amongst themselves, turning, if you will, the nectar of Krishna's pastimes, by which they get deep satisfaction and they experience transcendental bliss. This is the way it's described in the Chaitanya Charitamrita of Krishnadas Kaviraj, Madhya Lila, 25th chapter, 274th verse. Nana Babera Bhakti Jan, Hamsa Chakravata Gan, Yate Sabha Karena Vihar, Krishna Keli, Shumri Nala, Yaha Paha Sarvakala, Bhakta Hamsa Karaya Ahar. The devotees who have awakened their dormant relationship with Krishna are compared not only to the swans, but to the Chakravakra birds. Chakravakra birds are very exclusive, very specific, and very choosy about where they get their food from. And water. They get their food only from amongst the lotus flowers. And the Chakravakra birds are also said to get their water only from the rain cloud. They're said not to drink water from any muddy pools because as soon as the rain hits the earth, it becomes mixed with the earth itself and cloudy. And there's always a certain element or proportion of sediment. So the Chakravarti birds are uncompromising in the purity of the food they eat and the water they drink. They'll only eat food, they'll only eat buds of the lotus flowers, and they'll only drink from the rain cloud. So the devotees, the swan-like devotees of the Lord, are compared not only to swans, but as well to Chakravarti birds. They follow in the footsteps of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, whose only interest was in Harinama Sankirtan, chanting and hearing Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vadanam, Dasam, Sakyam, Atma, Nivedanam. Lord Chaitanya, Krishna himself, came down from the spiritual world 500 years ago, incarnated himself as the golden avatar, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. We just celebrated his appearance day recently. And by his activities, by his teachings, the teachings of his disciples, his pastimes, everything, he emphasized, he personified the Vedic truths. Aham sarvasya prabhavo mata sarvam pravarti iti madhva vijanti mam buddha bhave samantina. Lord Chaitanya, by his focus, by his prioritization of his activities, his words, and his pastimes, he pinpointed exactly the source of everything, the origin of both material and spiritual worlds as Sri Krishna. And his message was, we have only one business, and that is described in the 2nd canto, 5th chapter, 15th verse. Narayana para Veda. The whole purpose of Vedas is to know Narayana. If you're a so-called Vedantist, a so-called Vedanta scholar, and you're not simultaneously a devotee of the Lord, it is said you're missing the whole purpose of the Vedas. Vedantists, sometimes there's a play on word. Veda can also mean without, and Dant can also mean teeth. Well, if you're a so-called Vedantist, but you're not simultaneously a devotee of the Lord, if you're not extracting the lotus bud of Krishna from the general body of Vedic knowledge, then you are compared to a toothless old man. Without teeth, you cannot chew anything properly. You need teeth to break it down and to release the juices. But without teeth, you cannot enjoy anything. Everything is dry. Everything is tasteless. And this is the situation of those, even scholars and mental speculators, who are devoid of Krishna consciousness. There's matir na Krishna, parato shvatova, mito vipadya nagriya, adantago bhivavishidhambanam, punapanas charita charvaranam. Those who ruminate over things which are rejected by the higher swan-like beings are simply busily engaged in chewing the chewed. Sugar cane is good. It contains a lot of sweet and health-giving juice. If you get a fresh piece of sugar cane and you have a set of teeth, you can chew that and release a lot of nourishment, a lot of juice. It's an extremely pleasant as well as a fortifying experience. However, if you get a good piece of sugar cane but you have no teeth, there's no benefit you can get from it. So you can study the Vedas for many, many lifetimes, but if your intention is not to find Krishna as the goal, the compiler, and the object of the Vedas, then you're like a person with no teeth who, even if you have a good piece of sugar cane, you can't get any juice out of it, Or parallelly, you may have good teeth, but if the piece of sugar cane that you come across has already been chewed by someone else, if all the juice has already been extracted by it, it doesn't matter how good a teeth you have or how much you chew, you're just going to get all, you have that feeling when your mouth gets all dried up and there's no saliva, it gets numb, and it's just an awful, repulsive sort of an experience. And so the whole purpose of the Vedas, Narayana para Veda, the Vedas are meant for glorifying the Supreme Lord. Deva Narayana Gaja. The demigods, many people are enamored by the flowery words of the Vedas, promising a wonderful heavenly standard of life in the higher planets. But the demigods themselves, Tajman Tuste Kimapyam Jagatim Ishware Nayam Lokashiva Haratim Prashavam Ishwaraha. It is well known throughout the universe that those who worship the Lord can achieve anything. There are no limits on what devotees of the Lord can achieve in the service of the Lord by the mercy of the Lord. Obviously, if you're serving the direct interests of the Lord on earth, and what are the direct interests of the Lord? He says, Nacha Tajman Manesha Priya Kritama Bhavita Nrecha Anya Priyatara Bhuvi. Lord says, there's no one more dear to me, Nacha Tajman Manusheshu, amongst all of humankind, the ones who are most special, most dear to me, Anya Priyatara Bhuvi, are those who spread the gospel of Krishna consciousness, are those who swan-like glorify the name, fame, form, and activities of the Lord, so that others can hear, others can become purified, and make their way back to home, back to Godhead. So if you put yourself in the middle of what the Lord prioritizes for us, then there is nothing that you cannot achieve. And this fact is well known throughout the universe. And so therefore the demigods, Tashmin Tushne Kimapiram, they try their utmost to please the Lord. Their helmets are most often at the lotus feet of the Lord in prostrated obeisances. Om Tad Vishnu Paramam Param Sadabasanti Suru Deviva Chaksaradatam Yadu Pasho Banyo Jagavamsam Saminati Vishnu Paramam Param. The helmets of Brahma, of Indra, of Kuvera, of Vayu, they are most often to be found situated at the lotus feet of Krishna. Why? Because they know that by surrendering to Krishna, offering themselves to Krishna as instruments to do Krishna's will in the material world, there is nothing that they cannot accomplish. On our own, we're very insignificant. Even demigods like Brahma, Indra, they are spirit souls, jivas, just like you and I, 1/10,000th the tip of a hair. What can we do? What is our influence? What is our power? But if we hitch our tiny little chariot to the engine of the Lord, then there's nothing we cannot accomplish. By virtue of our oneness, and that's not a merging, it's not an undifferentiated oneness, but we are voluntarily offering of our own free will, manasa karmana gira, our mental activities, our physical activities, as well as our verbal activities. Nikidashvi avashito jivan mukta saujate. One who tenders one's mind, one's words, one's activities on the altar of Krishna consciousness. For such a person, there are no more limits. There are no more conditions on their life. Anything is possible. There's nothing that a devotee of the Lord cannot achieve. So those words which do not awaken oneself to one's empowerment, which do not make one aware of the freedoms which are available in our original liberated state, what's the use of them? They're rejected. We have no interest in them. Only crow-like men would be interested in chewing that which has already been chewed, or in approaching that which is chewable without any teeth. So Narayana Paraveda, Deva Narayana, the Vedas are meant for knowing Narayan. The demigods all worship Narayana, so why would we worship the demigods? They're worshiping Narayan for their own empowerment. They're installed in their positions of universal responsibility because of their worship of Narayan. Why would we worship the demigods when they're worshiping Narayan? It says, Kamash tastir jnana prapadyate nyadevatam. Those whose hearts are unclear, confused, distorted by kama, material, lusty desires, they worship the demigods, follow the rules and regulations according to that demigod worship. And demigod worship is very elaborately done. It's complicated. You have to have a lot of resources. Not so with Krishna worship. Pataram pusham palam tiyam yomi bhakti prayachi. Krishna says, offer me a flower, fruit, leaf, or water. Krishna wants everyone to worship him. He wants everyone to go back home, back to God. He makes himself completely accessible. Not so with the demigods. Those whose hearts are distorted by lusty desires take great trouble to gather vast resources and to perform complicated, elaborate, expensive pujas for the demigods, at the end of which the demigods have to ask Krishna, well, Krishna, do you sanction my giving him the desires of his materially distorted heart? And so why wouldn't you just go to Krishna? Any worship or any requests, petitions placed before the demigods are by nature illicit. Yeme anya devata bhakta yajanti shode tepi mami bhakta yajanti abidi porvakam. Yajanti abidi. Prabhupada gave the example, you get pulled over for speeding and the policeman, highway patrol is writing you a ticket. So you're kind of like, officer, if I slip you $100, can you make this go away? So worship me the demigod's like, I don't want to worship Krishna, because he may take charge of my life. He may purify me. He may ultimately gather me back home, back to Godhead. And frankly, I'm more like a crow person than a swan person. Frankly, I like roadkill. Frankly, I like going to the movies on Saturday night. Frankly, I like eating meat and drinking liquor. And frankly, I like chasing women. So I'm going to just worship one of the demigods for the fulfillment of my crow-like desires. That's like giving the highway patrolman or offering him $100. What happened? Well, you're already in trouble when you got pulled over. Now your trouble is much worse. You've just complicated. Now you've got an even more serious charge against you of trying to bribe a police officer. He's writing you a ticket. You need to take that ticket, suck it up, and send your check to the government. He's not independent. He doesn't have the right to waive your traffic violation. He's not authorized to accept your funds or your bribe money. If you try to bribe him, if you try to circumvent what you owe now the government, you'll get an even more serious charge against you and your problems will multiply. Similarly, no one ever solved their miserable situation in this material world by worshiping the demigods. The demigods themselves are subject to birth, death, disease, and old age. The demigods themselves, take Indra for example, are full of fear. They're always looking to see who's going to compete with them, who might be interested in usurping their throne. And they themselves ultimately have to die. So how can those who themselves are insecure, whose position depends upon the grace of the Lord, how are they able to independently solve our problems? They have the same problems we do. They worship Lord Krishna for the eradication of their misery. So we should follow in the footsteps of the demigods and do the very, very same thing. Narayana Paraloka, the abode of Narayana, is the ultimate abode. Again, why should you go to the abode of the demigods when you can go to the abode of Krishna? It's the same amount of effort. In fact, it's less effort. Physically, you have to do less in terms of offering, arrangements, and sacrifices. You just, very simply, whatever you do, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Offer whatever, before you eat it, offer it to Krishna. Make sure it's vegetarian. Make sure it's offered to Krishna. Offer to Krishna, then take prasadam. Before you associate with people, when you're choosing those with whom you're going to spend your time, choose devotees. Choose devotees. Instead of going to the bar and the pub and the cinema, go to the temple. Instead of going to the discotheque and the clubs, go and sing in kirtan. Jump up and down, dance, and celebrate the Lord. There's no extra effort involved in pleasing the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari Toshanam, but the result is you can't even compare it to elevation to the heavenly planets. If elevation to the heavenly planets is $100, elevation to Narayana Paraloka, Krishna Loka, the highest planet beyond this material and even at the top of the spiritual world, It's like $1 million. So if you are a businessman and you had X amount of energy and X amount of resources, and you had a choice, shall I devote the same amount of energy and resources to get $100, or should I devote and commit the same amount of energy and resources to get $1 million? That wouldn't be much of a decision to make, would it? So similarly, Narayana Paraloka, the abode of the Lord, is where we should set our sights. Yanti Deva Bratavinam, Pitu Yanti Pituna, Bhutani Yanti Bhutaja, Yanti Madhigino Pimam. Those who worship the demigods go to the planets of the demigods. Those who worship their ancestors go to the planets of the ancestors. Those who worship ghosts and spirits go to the ghosts and spirits. Those who worship me go to me. Why wouldn't you do that if you were of normal, sane level of intelligence? And finally, Narayana Para Makaha. It's interesting because Mecca, the place to which all Muslims must go at least once in their life, and the place to which, in the direction of which they bow down and say God is great 6 times a day. Mecca, it is said that originally that word Mecca was a place in Vedic times, pre-Muslim times, the place which is present-day Mecca, the holiest of holiest for the Muslims. In the pre-Muslim era, that was called Makkah. Same word we find here. Makkah means place of sacrifice, place where there are havans, where there are big yagas performed for the satisfaction of Vishnu. And we know that in previous ages, in the Treta Yuga age, for instance, the Yuga Dharma, the religious practice, the prescription for liberation in that age was to perform Makkah, huge sacrifices involving lots of butter, lots of samagri, lots of priests chanting Vedic mantras, lots of gold, lots of resources, at the end of which Krishna would descend on Garuda in order to accept his share of the sacrifices, and then seeing Krishna and Garuda, everybody in the whole region, Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Sudras, would achieve liberation by seeing the Lord and being seen by the Lord. It appears from the very moniker which is attached to the holiest place of the Muslims that in the Vedic age, this was a place where big sacrifices were performed. Similarly, they said Narayana is the goal and the object. Sacrifices are done not for mundane, fruitive results, but for pleasing Narayana, who is Bhoktaram Yagatapasham. He is meant to be the recipient, the beneficiary of all sacrifices. Just like the examples given, your stomach is meant to be the beneficiary of all foodstuffs. You can't put foodstuffs in your ear and have them reach the stomach. It's a hole, it's an orifice, but it doesn't work putting foodstuff in the ear and then expecting to be nourished and vitalized through the nose, through the eyes. One has to put foodstuffs through the mouth. That is the authorized way, that is the channel for satisfying the stomach. And when the stomach is satisfied, then the entirety of the body is satisfied. So similarly, Makkah, sacrifices are ways, authorized ways, specifically for pleasing the Lord. You cannot do a sacrifice for Indra, Brahma, Shiva. By definition, that's like putting food in the ear or putting in the nostril. You're meant to do Yagya Vishnu, Yagnartat Kamanon Yatra Loka Yam, Yagnartat Kamanon Yatra. There are nyatra, no other authorized yagas, sacrifices, Yagnato Kamanayana, Loka Yam Karma Bandhana, which there are no other procedures, there are no other havans which will bring you freedom from bandhana in this material world, save and accept sacrifice to Vishnu. Yagnar Lokyam Gana Tadar Tat Kamakante Mukta Sangha Samacharam. So for ultimate liberation, freedom from misery, from birth, death, disease, and old age, there is a system of sacrifices to Narayan, to Krishna, to Vishnu, which is completely authorized and effective. And if you take that process of sacrifice and direct it towards any other lesser personality or any other lesser goal than achieving love of God and attainment of the spiritual world, then it's just rejected. It's just rejected. That's all I can say. It is of no interest and of no value to those people who are seeking to go to the next level in their life. That literature, those cinemas, which do not have Narayana as their aim, are not at all purposeful. They are rather playgrounds for crow-like men who are interested in the rejected refuge of the world. Any book of knowledge, science, or art must lead to the knowledge of Narayana. Otherwise, it must be rejected. Why? Krishna boliya se jiva bahira nirmukha ataiva maya tari dea samsara dukkha. The whole purpose of life is to remember Vishnu. It is because we, Krishna boliya, we forgot Vishnu, that we ended up in this foreign material world of birth, death, disease, and old age, that we're suffering from hunger, thirst, miseries from other living entities, miseries from our own body and mind, miseries from material nature like typhoons, hurricanes, pandemics, earthquakes. Because we have forgotten Krishna, we are subject to all the miseries of being embodied in this material world. And so the rectification, the healing process, the medicine, the counteraction, pratikriyanyasheha, the way to counteract all these miseries is to identify the root cause, which is forgetfulness of Krishna, and address it directly. If forgetfulness of Krishna is the cause of all of my miseries, then remembrance of Krishna is going to revive my dormant Krishna consciousness and reestablish me in eternity, bliss, and knowledge. And I would have, if my goal is set on reviving my Krishna consciousness, eradicating miseries, I would have no interest in ruminating through non-God conscious literature, films, cinema, etc., etc. Continuing on, Narayana Paro Yoga. Yoga is meant for remembering Narayana. If you're a yogic teacher, a yogic practitioner, and you're just focused on getting a leaner, more fit body so you can enjoy the company of the opposite sex, that type of, we reject that as yoga. We don't accept that as yoga. Yoga is the Sanskrit root word of the English word yoke. It means union with God. If your yoga practice, your breathing, your pranayama, your asana, your astanga, your kundalini does not bring you closer to God, and we reject it. That yoga which is not God-centered is meant for crow-like men and women. And I'm not saying this. These are quotes from the Vedic scriptures, from the Srimad Bhagavatam. Narayana Paratapa. Many businessmen, many materialists, they get up at 3 o'clock in the morning. They go to work for making lots of money, or they jog, or they do yoga. They go on the treadmill. So devotees are not the only ones that get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, but we're only the ones that get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and dedicate the most valuable time of the day, the Brahma Muhurta, the pre-dawn hours for worshiping Krishna. We're the only ones that first thing in the morning don't go on our cell phones, don't go to Facebook, don't go to the newspaper, don't go to the coffee percolator, don't go to the TV. We go to the altar and we chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So tapasya, like rising early, is meant for satisfying Narayana. What you eat. Devotees don't just eat anything and everything. They eat only vegetarian food, which is offered to the Lord. To restrict and to be disciplined in the manner of your eating is also tapasya. Many people diet. Many people have different systems like intermittent fasting, and they want to carbo load, or they want to do this diet or that diet or the other diet. So they're also disciplined in terms of what they eat. And yet Their goal is not to please Narayana, not to please the Supreme Personality of God. So those types of fasting, those types of discipline are rejected by swan-like men. Narayana Paragyanam are many learned men who are gifted by God with high IQs, or all kinds of Nobel Prize recipients annually are awarded $50,000 in the highest level of achievement in mundane knowledge and scholarship, the Nobel Prize created by the people who created dynamite. And yet it says, Bahunam Jammanomate Gyanavam Prabhadyate Vasudeva Mahiti Samahatma Sudurlabha. After many, many births and deaths as a Nobel Prize winner, one finally comes to the correct conclusion that there is nothing but Narayan. There is only Narayan. He is the remote and he is the direct cause of everything phenomenal and noumenal in this material world. That is where your knowledge is ultimately meant to lead you after many, many births and deaths. And that knowledge which does not promote God consciousness or Narayan consciousness, it's rejected by swan-like men. And lastly, Narayana Paragati. Krishna says in the last verse, 6th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Yogi namapi sarvisham madgati nantaratma shraddha bhajate yoma teme yuktatama mataha. He is considered by me, and Krishna is the greatest authority. He says, Yogi namapi sarvisham, the greatest of all yogis, madgate, is he or she who makes me the goal. Madgatein atmanaha, whose soul hankers, who cries out heartfeltedly to be reunited with the Lord. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Shraddha Bhajate Yo Mam, Teme Yuktatama Mataha. He or she is considered the topmost yogi who heartfeltedly cries out to be reunited with the Supreme Personality of God. Prabhupada says all types of meditation and mysticism are meant for realizing Narayan. All austerities are meant for achieving Narayana. Culture of transcendental knowledge is meant for getting a glimpse of Narayana. And ultimate salvation is entering into the kingdom of Narayana. I hope we've made ourselves clear today. Is there any ambiguity in what I said? We don't have Lakshmi. What do you think, Rob? A word? Do you have a concluding word for us, Rob?
Yes, thank you, Prabhuji. Yeah, if we want to be the higher person, the higher being, the higher bird, we need to, if we want to be the swan, we must associate with swans. We must make Krishna the goal and to avoid worshiping the demigods and to turning to material gratification and turn our worship and focus to Krishna.
Exactly. And when you do that, you come into the best association. I get to hang out with guys like you,
I don't know if I'm the best association, Prabhuji, but you are for me, for sure.
We get to spend our Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday mornings with John Malik, who's on board here saying Hare Krishna, with Sundari Priya, who says, accept my humble obeisances, glories to Prabhupada. Bhakti Cody. I just checked your Facebook page, Cody. You have a lot of interesting posts there. Yeah, you have good content on your Facebook page. I like that. Bhakti Cody loves to glorify the name of the Lord in public places. Find people with whom he can go on Sankirtan too. Radhe Shyam Prabhu, also engaged in literary endeavor by translating Prabhupada's literary works into Kazakhstan for the benefit of the people in his home country. Oh, only 13 comments today? Were we not at all provocative? I think that might be an all-time low. Is that because of Easter weekend or LDS conference? Can we have a few more than 13 comments? Just say Hare Krishna or all glories of Prabhupada or true, you're full of baloney. We do have a number of likes. That's very nice. And I don't care personally for, I'm not saying comment for me or like for me, but it is a fact that the more interaction there is, the more likely these sessions are to reach new people, and that's our ultimate purpose. We're meant to enrich ourselves, to further deepen our attachment to Krishna, but we also would love it that people out there just in scrolling would intersect with us, and we greatly increase the chances of that happen by commenting and liking. Yeah, we're up to 16 comments right away, so that's great. And liking by Bobby. Bobby and I have been together for more than 50 years, but our 50th anniversary is coming up, I think, May 17th. John Malik, Sundari Priya, Terry, and Taruni. Sundari Priya again, Bhakti Cody, Nate, best engineer in all the three worlds, keeps iskcon radio going. By the way, if you're in Utah Valley, you can always get iskcon on your car radio at 1480 AM. But if you're anywhere else in the world, you just download a app, free app like Simple Radio, and anytime you're near an internet connection, or you can even use your cell connection to get the sounds of transcendence emanating from little old Spanish Fort, Utah. Radhe Shyam Prabhu, again I mentioned him. Raleigh's right here, rendering indispensable service. Sudevi Dasi just checked in. Thank you so much. Who else do we have? I have to get some of these pop-ups coming the way. Garanga Devi Dasi, thanks for joining us. Bhakti Gary is a regular. He's transcribing some of our talks, diving deep into the nectar. Krishna Premavati, thank you. Did I say Garangi? I think I did. Wayan, appreciate it. Arpit Singh, Sisodia, I think this is the second or third day they've been on board. Ram Kishore, love you, man. I love those Minnesotans. They are very spiritually attuned. Rupa Manjari from Northern California, my old associate from Berkeley, and Natasha Johnson. And there's one more here, Sue Shukshma, yeah, our Paravakacharya. And then, let's see, and Jean. We greatly appreciate all of you joining us today. And seeing as how Lakshmi's doing something else today, I'll just end with kirtan, such as I can do. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. I'm losing it here. Lakshmi, where are you when we need you? Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thank you once again for all of you. We appreciate you. We love you. We value you. We cherish you. And we look forward every Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday for spending this time with you. We have barely touched on this topic, so if it interested you in any way, shape, or form, join us again tomorrow morning, Transcendental Tuesday, for more on the topic, birds of a feather. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.